Good night, this is Fumi Sleepy Time Stories. Tonight's bedtime story is about to begin.
Once upon a time, there was a poor man who had only one son. When the son was born, a lucky star shone brightly in the sky. Those who saw it said that the child was very fortunate and that when he turned 14, he would marry the king's daughter. It happened that not long after the child's birth, the king of that land went on a disguised journey. As he passed through the village, he inquired if there was any news of interest. Someone replied, "Yes, a child has just been born here, and people say he is a lucky child. They even claim that when he turns 14, he is destined to marry the king's daughter." Hearing this, the king was displeased. He went to the child's parents and asked if they would be willing to sell him, but they firmly replied, "No, we will not sell him." However, the king persistently pleaded and even offered them a great sum of money. As they were extremely poor and barely had bread to eat, they finally agreed. They thought that since their child was lucky, he would surely return safely. The king took the child, placed him inside a chest, and rode away on horseback. When he reached a deep river, he threw the chest into the water, muttering to himself, "This boy will never become my daughter's husband." However, God protected the child. The chest did not sink but floated on the water, and not a single drop leaked inside. Eventually, the chest drifted 2 miles away from the king and stopped at a mill's water dam. Shortly afterward, the miller saw the chest and used a long stick to pull it to shore. Finding it quite heavy, he thought it must contain gold. But when he opened it, he discovered a beautiful little boy inside. The child smiled at him as if he were a long-lost relative. Since the miller and his wife had no children, they were overjoyed. "This is a gift from God," they exclaimed. They took great care of the child, raising him patiently and lovingly. Over time, he grew into a handsome young man admired by all. 13 years passed quickly. One day, the king happened to visit the mill. When he saw the charming youth, he asked the miller if this was his son. The miller replied, "No, I found him as a baby inside a chest floating on the water dam." The king immediately asked, "How long ago was this?" The miller replied, "About 13 years ago." At once, the king realized that this was the same child he had thrown into the river. Remembering the prophecy, he became resentful and devised another plan. He said, "What a fine young man. Could he deliver a letter to the queen for me? If he agrees, I will reward him with 2 gold coins." The miller replied, "As your majesty commands." The king then wrote a letter instructing the queen, "As soon as the bearer of this letter arrives, have him killed immediately. This must be done before I return." The boy set off with the letter, but on his journey he lost his way and wandered into a dark forest at night. Feeling his way through the darkness, he noticed a flickering light in the distance. He followed the light and arrived at a small cottage. Inside, an old woman was sitting alone. When she saw him, she was startled and asked, "How did you get here? Where are you going?" "I am delivering a letter to the queen, but I got lost and need a place to stay for the night." You are very unlucky to have stumbled upon this den of robbers. If they find you here, they will surely kill you." The boy replied, "I am too exhausted to walk any further. I just need to rest first." He placed the letter on the table, lay down on a bench, and quickly fell asleep. When the robbers returned, they asked the old woman about the stranger. She told them, "He is a messenger carrying a letter for the queen, but he lost his way." The robbers opened the letter and read the king's instructions to have the boy killed. Moved by either sympathy or a desire to defy the king, their leader tore up the letter and wrote a new one. In this new letter, he instructed the queen to have the boy marry the princess immediately upon arrival. Without disturbing the boy, they let him sleep through the night. The next morning, the old woman gave him directions to the palace. When the boy reached the palace, he handed the letter to the queen. Upon reading it, she immediately began preparing for the wedding. Seeing how handsome he was, the princess was more than willing to marry him. Some time later, the king returned to his palace. To his astonishment, the prophecy had come true. The lucky boy, whom he had tried to dispose of, had not only survived, but had also married his daughter. Confused, the king asked the queen, "How could this have happened?" "Here, look at the letter yourself." The queen showed him the letter she had received. Realizing it had been switched, the king questioned the boy. "What happened during your journey?" The boy replied, "I did nothing at all. Someone must have tampered with the letter while I was asleep." Furious, the king shouted, "Anyone who wishes to marry my daughter must first go to hell and bring me 3 golden hairs from the devil's head." "Only then will I allow this marriage," the boy replied. "I will return with them soon." And so he set off on his adventure. As he passed through the first city, the city guards stopped him and asked what he was there for. He replied, "I can do anything." They said, "If that's true, then you're the person we're looking for. Please tell us why the fountain in our city's marketplace has dried up and no longer flows. If you can find the reason, we will reward you with 2 donkeys loaded with gold." The young man said, "When I return, I will know everything." Not long after, he arrived at another city, where the guards also asked what he was capable of. He answered, "I can do anything." The guard said, "Then please do something for us. Tell us why the tree that used to bear golden apples is now completely bare." He said, "I would be happy to help you. When I return, I will have the answer." Finally, he reached the shore of a vast lake that he had to cross. He found a boat, and the ferryman asked him what he did for a living. The young man replied, "I can do anything." The ferryman said, "Then please tell me why I must ferry people back and forth all the time and can never do anything else. If you can give me the answer, I will reward you greatly." The young man said, "When I return, I will tell you the way." After crossing the lake, he arrived in hell. It looked eerie and terrifying, but the devil was not home at that moment. Instead, his grandmother was sitting in a rocking chair. Seeing the young man, she asked, "What brings you here?" He replied, "The 3 golden hairs from the devil's head." Then he told her about his journey. You are truly brave." She both sympathized with and admired the young man, so she decided to help him. She said, "I will do my best to assist you." Then she turned him into an ant and told him to hide in the folds of her cloak. Grateful, the young man said, "That is wonderful. But I also wish to know, why has the fountain in that city dried up? Why has the tree that once bore golden apples become barren? And what is the reason the ferryman is trapped in his task?" The old woman listened and said, "These 3 questions are indeed puzzling. While I pluck the golden hairs from the devil's head, stay still and listen carefully to what he says." Not long after nightfall, the devil returned home. As soon as he stepped inside, he sniffed the air and shouted, "How strange! I smell a human!" He searched around but found nothing. His grandmother scolded him. "I just tidied up, and now you're making a mess again." After all that fuss, the devil grew tired and rested his head on her lap. Soon, he fell asleep and began to snore. At that moment, the old woman plucked one golden hair from his head. The devil jumped up with a cry, "Ow! What are you doing?" She replied, "I had a bad dream and accidentally pulled your hair. I dreamt that in a city's marketplace, a fountain had dried up, but no one knew why." The devil said, "Ha! If only they knew, they would rejoice. There is a toad crouching under a stone inside the fountain. If they kill the toad, the water will flow again." After saying this, he fell asleep once more. The old woman seized the moment and plucked a second golden hair. The devil woke up angrily and shouted, "What are you doing now?" She said, "Don't be mad. I just had another strange dream. I dreamt that in a great kingdom there was a beautiful tree that once bore golden apples, but now it is completely barren. What could be the reason?" The devil said, "Ha! If they knew this secret, they would be overjoyed. At the tree's roots, a mouse is gnawing away. They must kill the mouse, and the tree will bear golden apples again. If they don't, the tree will soon die. Now let me sleep in peace. If you wake me again, you will regret it." Once again, he fell into a deep sleep. When he started snoring, the old woman pulled out the 3rd golden hair. The devil leapt up furiously, but she quickly calmed him down, saying, "I had yet another strange dream. I saw a ferryman who seemed doomed to ferry people across the lake forever. Is there some magic trapping him?" The devil laughed. "What a fool! If only he knew. He just needs to place the oar into the hands of a passenger, and that person will take his place. Now let me sleep." The next morning, the devil got up and left. The old woman turned the ant back into the young man and handed him the 3 golden hairs, reminding him to remember the answers to the 3 questions. The young man thanked her sincerely and set off on his journey home. Before long, he reached the river crossing. The ferryman saw him return and hurriedly asked for the answer. The young man said, "Take me across first, and then I will tell you." Once they reached the other side, he told the ferryman, "Simply hand the oar to the next passenger, and you will be free." Next, he arrived at the city where the golden apple tree stood. He told them that they must kill the mouse gnawing at the roots for the tree to bear fruit again. As a reward, they gave him great treasures. Finally, he returned to the city with the dried-up fountain. He told them to kill the toad hiding beneath the stone, and the water would flow once more. They were very grateful and rewarded him with 2 donkeys loaded with gold. At last, the lucky young man arrived home. His wife was overjoyed to see him and hear how he had succeeded. The young man presented the 3 golden hairs to the king, who could no longer oppose his marriage to the princess. Seeing all the gold and treasures, the king excitedly asked, "My dear son-in-law, where did you find such riches?" The young man replied, "By a lake where there is more gold and silver than you can imagine." The greedy king eagerly asked, "Tell me, can I go there and take some?" The young man answered, "Take as much as you want. At the lake you will see a ferryman. Just ask him to take you across, and you will find the gold like sand on the shore." The greedy king hurriedly set off. When he reached the lake, he called for the ferryman to take him across. The ferryman readily agreed. But as soon as the king stepped into the boat, the ferryman placed the oar in the king's hands and leaped ashore, leaving the king behind to ferry people across the lake forever. And so, the wicked king received his just punishment. If you ask, is that king still there ferrying passengers? You might say, yes, because no one would dare take the oar from his hands and bring trouble upon themselves.